Hello and welcome to Telling the Earth's Stories. I'm Russell Boswell, a former teacher and these days a tourism consultant working primarily in regional tourism around Australia. And I'm also the manager of the Savannah Guides organisation, which is a network of over 500 tour guides and tour operators around the country. Today we're going to talk about telling the Earth's stories. I want to talk to you about the power of storytelling and how it can influence your information transmission, how to get started with some stories, and maybe a few tips to help you along the way. Firstly, I wanted to tell you that being human is about being a storyteller. For the last million years, our species has been physically growing its frontal lobe so that we can deal with stories, tell them, and respond to them. And so this has driven our whole culture, our religion, our entertainment, and everything else. So when we think about being human, it is about being a storyteller. And if you want people to learn, if you want people to understand things or believe you, if you want people to have a good time, a story is the way to do that. And this is why storytelling affects the brain. Storytelling triggers electric synapses between different parts of your brain, and you can see those areas that just the plain transmission of facts does not connect with. So you want those sensory inputs. You want that idea of physical involvement. You want emotions in a story, and you want to release that dopamine, that feel-good hormone. So think of this in examples of interpretation and education that you know. The new trend in tourism is called transformational tourism, where we're trying to get deep into our audience's minds with deep and meaningful experiences so they'll love it, remember it, and keep coming back. This is a place that does it particularly well, the Undara experience in Queensland. Although they have the longest and largest lava tubes in the world, the stories of Indigenous heritage, cattle and pioneers there also are intertwined and expressed through things like design, tour commentaries, and the activities, including their fabulous railway carriage accommodation. This is a very useful technique brought to us by Professor Sam Ham from Idaho. He tells us that we need a theme or a main take-home message in our interpretation. Whether this is static or spoken, any stories should contain these ideas. The second factor is that they should be organized so our brains can follow them. Give me a plot line, give me chapters, some way that I can track your story. The story needs to be relevant. That doesn't mean that you need to know me personally. Every human understands struggle, life, death, love. How can we involve those kinds of emotions and aspects in our story? And finally, it's got to be enjoyable. Keep them engaged, keep them entertained, and think about this. If you want to educate people, you want to get conservation messages across, commercial activity messages, or cultural objectives, they all need these kinds of components in their stories. This place does it particularly well, Capricorn Caves near Rockhampton. And the whole message around this place is come and engage with the cave, do a tour, adventure caving, dig the ancient fossils there and learn about them. Come along and be engaged with the cave. That's their story. So how do we start? First of all, of course, you want to find out who your audience is. It might be the local communities, could be students or tourists. It might be partners that you're working with or people that you want to work with. Figure out who your main audiences are and what your objectives are in talking to them. Once you know who they are and what you want, then you can talk about how you're going to communicate with them. And here's a geotourism, ecotourism establishment that's doing exactly that. The Australian Age of Dinosaurs in Winton. They've engaged with their community beautifully, and their message is that these are our dinosaurs. Whether you want to dig them, clean up the fossils with a dentist drill, or come along to the museum, the heritage and the ownership and the involvement with these fossils, these dinosaurs, are very much a part of their message. Don't forget, of course, that Of the world's World Heritage areas, 78% are listed for their cultural values. So even again, in the story of the dinosaurs, where's the human angle? How are we going to involve people in these stories so that people find their relevance with your dinosaur story? Here are a few storytelling tips. Of course, just to revisit, you want to clarify your target audience and your objectives. Remember Sam's HAM, TORE principles: thematic, organized, relevant, and entertaining. Get that emotion and description in there. And most of all, get engaged with your audience. The father of interpretation, Freeman Tilden, said that interpretation is provocation. So question your audience, get them interacting, get them involved in a sensory way. And in that vein, I'd like now to give you a presentation that we do for tour guides and community about the geological history of the wet tropics World Heritage Area. Perhaps you can come up out of your seat and join me for this. Are you ready? The wet tropics rocks. The wet tropics rocks. I'm talking base layer, 400 million years retro. That's marine sediments floating down and then getting folded, compressed. Give me some compression, yeah! To metamorphic change. And down here's where you find the gold that we had in our gold rushes, Palmer, Hodgkinson, bling, baby. And it's granite time. Molten granite pushing up under the surface, solidifying under the surface, making those great gray grains. You know the ones. Those great gray grains we see on the mountaintop where that soil has washed away. The great gray grains of granite. Next, we got sporadic volcanic activity giving us magma, making that rich red farming soil in the tablelands with coffee and tea and sugar and milk. Mangoes. Then that heavy rain is going to come again. It's going to wash that soil down the river drains to the coastal plain. And some of that will return to the sea again. The wet tropics rocks. The wet tropics rocks. The wet tropics rocks. The wet tropics rocks. Wet tropics rocks. The wet tropics rocks.